Welcome to my tutorial for Daioh for the arcade. And mainly, the main thing I'm going to cover is how to beat the final boss easily, which is actually extremely easy if you do what I did. It may still take a few tries, it can still be kind of tricky to get the positioning right, but it means you will definitely beat the final boss if you use this method. Otherwise, the final boss is actually, it seems extremely difficult, and I didn't even know if I was going to be able to complete the game. Or it may have just taken me hours of practice to get all the bullet patterns down, but it was extremely difficult from what I played. I failed on it a lot. That's where a lot of my playtime went, is failing on the final boss and on the stage 6, section 5 checkpoint. I actually died a lot on that part. So the only two parts of the video that I edited were the stage 6-5 checkpoint, which I spent a lot of time on, and the final boss checkpoint, which I spent a lot of time on. So in total, it took me around an hour and 33 minutes to beat the game. It would have taken me a lot longer if I didn't figure out how to exploit the final boss. Thanks to Shadow Flare 7799, he actually told me that the game actually, it has some kind of ranking system that if you die or if you don't have power-ups, the game actually lowers the difficulty. So I looked into it. I didn't notice the difficulty lower down on the final stage, maybe because I already got too far before activating it, but what I did notice was that if I wasted about 3 or 4 full continues, I would get a better power-up on the 4th continue. It would be an extra shield so I could take an extra hit. And that allowed me to do the exploit on the final boss, which I'll explain on that part of the video. It's very easy to do. You just have to, if you do fuck it up, then you're going to have to commit suicide and go through about 3 or 4 continues. And then you'll have one more chance to do it again. And then if you mess up, you have to, again, wait for 3 or 4 more continues to get the power-up again. But it does seem to appear consistently. So eventually you will win. It is easy to do. It's hard to get it perfect every time, so it's probably going to take a few attempts. But I was able to do it a decent amount of times by using save and load state practice to practice the part, and then I was able to finally do it after a few legit attempts while actually playing the final boss. Luckily, the final boss gives you a checkpoint right before the boss, so you don't have to go far back. But that's going to be the main roadblock, but as long as you have this video and I break it down for you, I don't think you're going to have any problems. You should be able to beat the game. I haven't seen any other information about how to beat this game easily, so I think this will be useful to put out a tutorial. I don't put out tutorials on a lot of games like shooters or games that didn't take super long to beat, but I do put tutorials out on some moderate games, but I thought it would be worth at least putting one out for this, mainly to explain that final boss trick. Because I didn't see that anywhere. I was looking for videos on how to beat the final boss easily, and I didn't see anything except for, really having to get the bullet patterns down. It looked extremely difficult. It probably would have taken a while for me to get it down. I think I could have learned it, but it probably would have taken me hours to do. I recently beat Gunsmoke, which was, fucking ridiculous, and I made a tutorial on that for the arcade. So, I do think I would have been able to learn the final boss. I was starting to get a rhythm to it a little bit, but I could tell it was going to take me a lot longer because the second form was giving me a lot of trouble. But yeah, basically I left all the deaths in for the most part because I wanted to show how the game works, and the game is also, it's short anyway. It's only about 20-something minutes with the deaths left in. It didn't take me super long, aside from those 2 parts that I mentioned. Stage 6, Section 5, and the final boss checkpoint. But aside from that, I moved through the game pretty smoothly, and you'll see none of the rest is edited, so you'll see the pace that I moved through the game at, and you'll get an idea. You'll see how many checkpoints there are. Every time you see a dash like 1-2, 1-3, 1-4, that's a new section. So that's also another checkpoint. So when you die, even if you waste a full continue, you will start at your last checkpoint. But the game does switch up the rules of respawning. So for some of the bosses, you will actually be able to waste multiple lives on the boss and still respawn right at the boss and continue fighting. Not if you waste to continue, but if you just waste one of your lives, you can respawn at some of the boss fights. For the final boss, you can't do that at all. So the game switches up the rules and does what it wants with that. But for the most part, you will be able to respawn at the checkpoints that appear. So even if you die a lot, you'll get through. Because every time you die at a checkpoint, you're going to respawn with 3 bombs. So you can use those 3 bombs to kind of, just muscle your way through to the next checkpoint without having a lot of problems, because you can just save your 3 bombs for when you need them, and you can get through the checkpoint and just die, and then you'll be at the next checkpoint. So it's a very easy way to get through the game, and you'll see me do that a lot. So this is a very unique shooter in that it actually uses 6 firing buttons, which you don't really see for shooters. Usually they're like 1 or 2 button games. So this game, the way it works is the 3 bottom buttons are going to be your 3 different main weapons. So one button, I believe it's the middle button, is going to be this lightning attack you see me using, which is good when there's a lot of weak enemies on screen. It clears them out, it homes in on them and kind of sparks off of them and takes them out. It's good for a lot of weak enemies, though I don't find it too good when there's stronger enemies that take more hits on screen, because it takes long to take them out. But it's good to experiment with the 3 different weapon types for different sections. If you're having trouble with a section, try a different weapon. You have 3 different weapons you can try. You have a spread shot, a lightning shot, and you have these missiles that are very slow. And I really didn't find much of a use for them, because I seem to do at least as much damage using the spread shot if I got most of the bullets in on the enemy. So I really didn't find much of a use for the missiles, but you may find a use for them. So try them out. Then you have 3 top buttons. The 3 top buttons, I guess you could say buttons 4, 5, and 6. That's how they're set on main. Those buttons are going to be your 3 different types of bombs. You have your first bomb that you have is these fireballs that kind of spread out and go into enemies. It's good for if you want to soak up some of the bullets so you don't get hit by bullets, and it will damage the enemies, but it doesn't do a ton of damage to enemies. And then, see, this is the middle bomb right here, these blue lasers. I'm just wasting them all here. They're decent for bosses if you want to keep a distance. It's probably your best option if you don't want to be right on top of the boss and want to play it safe. You can use those to shoot at the boss. And then there's your third bomb, which you don't really see me using to the final boss. And that's the most powerful one. But for that bomb, you have to place it directly on top of the boss to do the most damage. So that's a harder one to use. It doesn't have a lot of range, but it does the most damage. So those are your 3 different types of bombs. So keep those in mind. You're going to want to experiment with your different bombs and your different shots for different parts, just to make it easier if you're having trouble with a part. Make sure you cycle through those different weapons and try different things. But you're never going to have to go too far to get to the next checkpoint. But 6-5 is definitely probably going to give a lot of people trouble, because it gave me some difficulty, and I mean, I'm decent at these kind of games, so I could see that being a sticking point, but I'm sure there can be other sticking points too. For me, it was just those 2 parts that really gave me a lot of trouble. I mean, 6-5 really wasn't that bad, but I did die a lot on it. But there's definitely a way to approach it that makes it a lot easier. Sometimes you don't find the best way to approach it as far as budgeting your special weapons and stuff to make it easier. Because you always have 3 bombs you can use at any given checkpoint. You'll always start off with those 3 bombs. So if you die, you'll have your 3 bombs back. Your bombs are shown on the bottom left corner, those little missile icons. Right now I have 4, but if you do die, you'll start with 3. And on your top left, you're going to see indicators of how powered up you are for your shots. Occasionally, you also get a purple floating P, which is a shield that gives you an extra hit. And I'm going to show you how to exploit that and beat the final boss. It's going to assure that you can beat the game. So as long as you get past one of the harder checkpoints, which is 6-5, you should definitely be able to beat the game showing the method that I'm showing. And I haven't seen it anywhere else online, so I think that's going to help players who just want to beat the game, which is all I'm really looking to do with most of the games that I go through. I go through a lot of games, in mass, in volume. So I'm usually just looking to beat the game. And as I've said before, I take on additional challenges, in games that I want to do that for. Usually hardest modes and things like that, or just really hard games. I don't do a lot of 1 credit and no death runs, but it's definitely something to look into for the future, to try different things. But you'll see when I die, I'm not going to start that far back. See, I'm on 4-7. You see how many fucking sections there are in each level. Very uncommon for a shooter. This is almost in the style that I call coin waster, where there's no penalty for death, but it does set you back a little bit, so you do have to make a little bit of progress. And like I said, there was still 2 very, very hard sections. Mainly 1 very hard section, but the 6-5 was pretty hard. It wasn't easy. It wasn't especially difficult, but it was, it was definitely, it required some planning. But the game is really not too hard except for the final boss. That's the, that part can be ridiculously difficult, very, very difficult, but it's not going to be because of what I'm going to demonstrate. I could have just cut this video and just, showed the final boss and made a tutorial for that, but that's not really the way I do my tutorials usually, so, it would be just kind of strange to put it in the playthroughs and just have just the boss shown. Especially since it's such a short game anyway. It only takes about 20 minutes for me to get through. Aside from the 2 big edits I did on 6-5 and the last boss. But yeah, not much to say. If you grab these Bs, you're going to get your bombs. And that's going to give you more bombs. And the Ps just power up your shots. So aside from that, I've pretty much covered everything by this point. It took me a while to get to all the little basics, but that's pretty much all you need to know about the controls. But yeah, don't forget that if you're having trouble, just start using your bombs when you're about to get hit. As soon as you're about to get hit, use that middle bomb because it's good. It shoots up. It's those big blue lasers. You can use that to clear out a lot of shit if you want to just play it safe and stay in the back and just fire off the bombs. That'll get you through a lot of parts. But, you will still have to do some dodging and stuff like that. You see this checkpoint's taking me some tries. It's starting to get a little harder here. But I don't remember this part taking me too long. But yeah, eventually you will work your way through these sections. I think it's mainly going to be 6-5 that's going to be a more troublesome type of area. I think it's kind of good to show how the game progresses, to see where you start when you die, and you can see how the game works. And if it's a game you want to work on. It's a pretty easy game if you're just looking for a shooter to beat. This is a good one because as long as you know what to do on that final boss, you're probably not going to have too much of a hard time beating it. It did take me a while to figure that out, but luckily it wasn't too bad. I mean, like I said, I probably would have spent hours on that boss. It seems extremely difficult. I did post some of my practice sessions and failed attempts on the final boss. So if you search Daioh on my channel, you'll see that as well. I didn't post all my failed attempts, but I posted some of it. And you'll see how difficult it gets. I mean, if you get there and try to fight it normally, you'll see how difficult the boss can be. But really all you have to do is just get that power up that I mentioned and just follow the positioning I do. Basically, you'll get it. And I'll explain that in a little bit more detail at that part. This guy's really easy. You pretty much just, stay all the way at the bottom of the screen. He shoots a few bullets sometimes, but extremely easy enemy. You don't even have to kill him. Eventually he'll just leave. The lightning is pretty good for a lot of these small enemies, but, you know, depending how powered up your shots are, will sometimes determine which ones you want to use too, because the lightning is now better right now than the spread shot. Now the spread shot's pretty good, but it was down to like two streams of bullets, which is pretty damn weak. So sometimes you may want to use a different weapon just because, you know, they're not powered up. I think they all power up at the same time if I understand the game properly. So I think if, you know, your weapon power applies to all your weapons. So I think I was able to take a hit because I had the armor, but see now the game is suddenly letting me actually use my regular lives and respawn right at the boss. Occasionally the game will let you do that. Some of these arcade games are very strange and very inconsistent with the way they punish death. It makes it kind of hard to define the game and understand how it works. They'll just switch the rules at random. And it's really not random, but it feels that way because you don't know what rules the game is going to play by. A few games that did that was Shinobi does that. And Rostan did that. Missing in Action. Those are 3 arcade games that you can get to the very end of the game. You have unlimited continues until the final stage. And then all of a sudden your continues are gone and you have to start back at the beginning of the game. So you could have worked on it for hours and got to the final stage. Which happened to me on those games. That's how I know about it. I worked on them for a while, got to the end, and then, you know, the game decided that you're not going to continue anymore when you get to the end. So some of these arcade games do some real sneaky tricks. So that's just part of how arcade games work. If you don't know what they're going to do, they may throw you, you know, some strange new rules. Luckily, this game didn't have any bullshit like that where it makes you start the beginning of the game or anything like that. So it doesn't do anything, you know, sneaky like that. For the games that I mentioned, like Shinobi for arcade, I would really have to learn those games. I'd have to learn those final stages. You know, just practicing save and load state and really master them, and then I would have a chance of beating the full games. But I'd have to really practice that isolated. So yeah, soon is coming up this 6-5 checkpoint, which is the one that gave me the most trouble. But you're not going to see me die on that part because I edited it out. Because there was too many deaths. It would have been a very long video. Probably at least an extra 10 minutes or more of dying on that part, maybe even longer. But you can see these checkpoints are getting harder, and I'm starting to die more frequently already on this stage. It was definitely starting to spike up in difficulty for sure. Luckily, you have unlimited continues. As long as you put in your fake money. But yeah, it never really gets too hard except for, like I said, 6-5 and the final boss. As long as you're decently familiar with shooters, you're probably not going to have too much trouble with this game. Yeah, Shadow Flare 7799 actually does no death runs of a lot of really hard fucking games. Games like this and much harder games. And he does no death runs of it. It's a great channel if you like no death runs. You're not going to see too much of that on my channel. So yeah, that checkpoint that you saw me blow past was actually a difficult checkpoint. But if you do things in the order that I did them there, if you look at where I used my bombs, exactly how I attacked that part, you'll be able to take out those large enemies quickly enough to be able to get through that section without much trouble. But if you're having trouble with that section 6-5, you know, rewind the video and check out exactly what I did. There was a reason for the order. You know, I don't really need to explain exactly how I moved, but If you just watch that section 6.5 and just follow what I did for that strategy, if you're having trouble with it. And if you do that, it shouldn't be too difficult. The hard part was in figuring out exactly how to plan everything out. But executing it is really not difficult for that part. So here's the final boss. They give you a bunch of power-ups before. Now the trick here is going to be, you're going to want to have your shield that I mentioned. It's the purple floating P. Now you want to be up at the very top of the screen near his head. And you're going to drop these powerful bombs, these ones, and make sure you get his whole head and body in there like that. And drop all 4 of them directly on his head. And by doing that, it's going to hit those wings on the side as well, which I think does extra damage to him. Because you can also destroy his arms, the left and right arms that he has. So by putting it right in the middle, it seems to damage all of his body parts at once. So you want to drop them on his head, and as soon as the bomb disappears and it's done working, drop the next one. You want to kind of wait for the bomb to fully finish working and then drop the next one. You want to be ready to hit it immediately. I don't think if you just tap it rapidly, if it'll work as well if you just drop bombs rapidly, like just mashing. I tried to wait until one of the bombs finished and then drop the next one. And you want to be positioned right on his head. You won't die from touching his body, so you can position right on his head and drop those bombs. And you want to make sure you're using those exact bombs you saw me using. And the strategy is very specific, and you want to make sure you have your the shield power up, as I mentioned. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to commit suicide and waste 3 or 4 continues. And every 3 or 4 continues you waste, you'll have 1 life. On your first life of that next continue, you're going to have a chance to grab that floating purple P from one of the enemies. And when you get it, it's going to give you an extra hit that you can take. And by having that extra hit you can take, you can do that strategy where you get up real close on him, because you're probably going to get hit by one of the bullets he sprays out. But it'll give you enough time to be able to pull that off by staying up on his head and dropping those 4 bombs. You want to be firing the whole time too, of course, because you need that bullet damage too, not just the bombs. I recommend using save and load state, and make sure you save state and practice with that shield power up. Make a save state with the shield power up and practice that boss, and just practice doing that. And after you're able to get it a few times, you have a good chance of getting it when you finally get that power up again, because you're going to have to commit suicide until you get it again. But by doing that, you shouldn't have trouble beating the game. It should make it easy. It's not as easy as it looks. It's a little bit hard to get right. But I didn't have it down perfect, and eventually I would get it. It would go through. So if you have any questions about the game, about what I did, feel free to ask. And thanks for watching.